And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update to Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Hank Mobley, his biography, and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. First up, Dip In, released in 1965. Mobley teams up with Lee Morgan for one of his most charming frontline pairings ever. Check out The Dip, blues-driven, melodic, and effortlessly swinging. Harold Mabon on piano adds gospel-flavored sparkle. Next up, Peking Time, released in 1958. A youthful, energetic Mobley. With teen sensation Lee Morgan on trumpet, the title track bounces with optimism and fiery hard bop phrasing. It's Mobley on the rise, fresh and fearless. Next up, Curtain Call, released in 1957. This album swings like a conversation among friends, playful, elegant, and deeply melodic. Finally, The Turnaround, released in 1965. Dark grooves, punchy arrangements, Freddie Hubbard's trumpet fire. 4 albums, 4 flavors, blues, youth, elegance, and grit. And there was some insight into what's coming up during this summer, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Hank Mobley, his biography, and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. These next 4 albums show his range from bluesy swagger to pure optimism to elegant conversational swing and even hard-edged grit. So let's jump right in with one of the most joyful entities in Mobley's entire catalogue. The album's called Dip In. It was released in 1965. If you want Mobley at his friendliest, his bluesiest, his most approachable, Dip In is a record to slide across the table. This is Mobley teaming up once again with Lee Morgan. And whatever era you focus on, these two together never miss. Morgan's brassy fire bouncing against Mobley's round of warmth, that's chemistry right there. Ricardo Bossa Nova is the earworm. Mobley takes a tune that could have been novelty and instead turns it into a clean toe-tapping blue note swinger. But the real treasure for a lot of Mobley fans is The Dip. Mobley rides that bluesy groove like syrup over pancakes. He slides through the chord changes with the control of a singer who knows exactly which word to emphasize and which to whisper. And Harold Mabon, he brings that gospel-tinged sparkle on piano, the kind that makes your shoulders relax without you noticing. This album is pure feel-good hard bop, the kind of record you put on once and again because it never stops sounding right. The next album's called Peking Time, released in 1958. Now we are time traveling, jumping back to 1958, early Mobley, the Mobley who still had that bee-hop fire burning in his phrasing. Peking Time is Mobley with rocket fuel, and Lee Morgan is right there with him. Though remember, Morgan was still basically a kid at this point, a kid who could outplay half the jazz world before lunch. The title track, Peking Time, is one of the happiest, bounciest tunes Mobley ever penned. It's got that late 50s blue note sunshine baked into every bar, brisk tempos, bright harmonies, that open road optimism you hear in only a handful of hard bop recordings. Mobley's tone here is a little lighter, a little quicker, his phrasing more bebop infused. You hear those rapid fire turns, those lines that curl and twist like brushstrokes. This isn't the fully matured 60s Mobley, but you can feel the momentum. The ideas pour out of him, the energy is contagious. So if you want to hear the sound of a young artist ascending, sprinting really, Peking Time is your snapshot. Now here's a treat, Curtain Call, released in 1957. The gem that sat on a shelf for decades because Blue Note for whatever reason didn't release it back in 1957. And when you hear the lineup, you'll wonder why anyone held this thing back. Kenny Dorham on trumpet, Sonny Clark on piano. Dorham's tone is velvet, softer than Morgan, more introspective than Hubbard, and it blends with Mobley's tenor like two old friends finishing each other's sentences. Sonny Clark meanwhile is a spark in the corner of the room. His comping is light, dancing, perfectly placed, and when he solos he lifts the entire group an inch off the ground. Listening to Curtain Call feels like finding a missing chapter in a novel you thought you'd already finished. And once you hear it, the story of Mobley's evolution suddenly feels more complete. The next one's called The Turnaround, released in 1965. The Turnaround is Mobley with his collar popped, leaning into the blues with a swagger and a little bit of smoke in there. Freddie Hubbard joins him here, and Hubbard's presence alone tells you the temperature is about to rise. The title track, The Turnaround, is an instant classic. Dark, swaggering, blues heavy, you can practically picture a film noir detective walking down a rain-soaked alley with this playing behind him. Mobley fattens his tone here, pushing it a little rougher, a little bolder. Hubbard meanwhile shows up with those laser beam trumpet lines that cut right through the mood. Then you've got straight ahead, no tricks, no frills, fast, tight, pure hard bop. The rhythm section locks everything in place with a kind of no-nonsense authority that gives Mobley the perfect launchpad. This is Mobley's tougher side. Beneath that reputation for mellowness was a player who could dig in, who could create tension and grit whenever the music demanded it. So 4 albums, 4 different angles on one of the most versatile tenor voices in jazz. You've got the blues-soaked joy of Dip In, the youthful fire of Peking Time, the elegance of Curtain Call, and the gritty swagger of The Turnaround. And there was some insight into more of Hank Mobley's best albums of all time, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Hank Mobley, his biography, and best hits. Now it's time for some trending album news. Trending right now on the Jazz Albums charts is Tony Saunders' new album, The Romance Continues. This one's pure late night magic, 15 tracks of warm grooves, silky bass lines and the signature Tony Saunders touch. From the opener, Gimme Some More, the vibe is tight, clean and effortlessly smooth. And the lead single, total chart-ready gold, soulful melodies, mid-tempo grooves and that polished production. Produced alongside Grammy-level talent, the entire album feels lush and intimate, tasteful strings, mellow keys and crystal clear arrangements that glide like calm water at night. So if you're into smooth jazz that relaxes, grooves and hits just right, The Romance Continues is your must-have this week. And there was some trending album news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We're going for a short break, we'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Hank Mobley's best albums of all time. Stay tuned. You're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Hank Mobley, his biography and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. To start off with, A Caddy for Daddy, pure mid-60s blue note energy. Mobley teams up with Lee Morgan and Curtis Fuller for a frontline that practically jumps out of the speakers. The grooves are deep, the writing is soulful and the solos are full of joyful swagger. Then we step back in time to Hank Mobley Quintet from 1957. This is early Mobley, sharp and bright, playing alongside Donald Byrd, Wynton Kelly and Philly Joe Jones. It's lean, crisp and full of that classic bop energy that defined an era. Next up, The Feeling's Good, a warm, glowing session that Blue Note kept in the vault for decades. It's Mobley at his most melodic and relaxed. And finally, we close with Mobley's masterpiece of ambition, A Slice of the Top. Big ensemble, rich harmonies, dramatic writing. Mobley proving he wasn't just a soloist, he was a full-scale composer. And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's show, it's about Hank Mobley, his biography and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. So these four albums shine a light on Mobley the composer, Mobley the arranger, Mobley the visionary. So let's start with one of his most soulful outings. The first one's called A Caddy for Daddy, released in 1965. This one is pure blue note gold. It's also one of Mobley's most fun sessions. The front line is stacked. Lee Morgan, Curtis Fuller and Mobley himself form a three-horn wall of soul jazz bliss. The title track is classic Mobley, funky, bluesy, catchy and overflowing with an unmistakable swagger. Morgan and Fuller punch accents behind Mobley's lines, creating an almost big band effect inside a small group recording. The morning after shows Mobley's sophisticated writing, shifts in light, shadow, harmony and mood all packed into a tight composition. Herbie Hancock's piano adds sparkle and controlled fire. If someone wants to know what mid-60s Blue Note sounded like at its most joyful, this album is a must listen. The next one's called the Hank Mobley Quintet, released in 1957. One of Mobley's early masterpieces, recorded with the incredible Donald Byrd on trumpet and the always swinging Wynton Kelly. This album is Mobley refining his voice, not yet the fully mellow 60s tone but growing, becoming more expressive and more personal. The opener, Funk in Deep Freeze, has become a jazz standard for a reason. It's got brains, bounce and beauty all wrapped together. Mobley's solo is patient, melodic and deeply musical. Byrd's playing is fiery but elegant, a perfect counterweight. And the rhythm section, Kelly, Chambers, Philly Joe Jones, swings like a perfectly tuned engine. This album shows Mobley transitioning from a young prodigy to a mature storyteller. The next one's called The Feeling's Good, released in 1962. This one's a treasure that Blue Note kept hidden for decades. Featuring Lee Morgan, Sonny Clark and Billy Higgins, the album has a loose, warm, joyful character. Mobley's writing here is especially emotional. Old world, new imports and yes indeed, reveal a lyrical, almost poetic Mobley. The recording has that classic Rudy Van Gelder glow, round, intimate, almost living room natural. You hear Mobley smiling through his horn. It's music that feels like sunlight, relaxed, confident and deeply human. And we close with Mobley's most ambitious work, an album unlike anything else in his catalogue. A Slice of the Top, released in 1979, uses an expanded ensemble, euphonium, tuba, trumpet, alto, tenor, piano, bass, drums. This album is cinematic, almost orchestral. The compositions are harmonically rich, full of unexpected turns. The title track is bold and moody. Hank's Other Back blends blues and modernism. Cute and Pretty is tender and melodic. Mobley himself said this is one of his best writing, and many critics agree. It's the clearest proof that he wasn't just a great soloist, but a visionary composer. So from the elegance of Soul Station to the innovation of A Slice on Top, Hank Mobley gave jazz one of its most beautiful voices. A voice built not on flash or bravado, but on honesty, melody and deep musical wisdom. And there was some insight into more of Hank Mobley's best albums of all time, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Hank Mobley, his biography and best hits. We've come to an end of this week's episode of the Jazz Update, so now it's time to recap what we discussed during today's show. Hank Mobley was known for his smooth melodic style, weaving blues, bebop and soulful swing into every note. A key member of Blue Note Records' classic lineup, he shared the stage with legends like Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, Art Blakey, Lee Morgan, Freddie Hubbard and Grant Green. From the late 1950s through the mid-60s, Mobley's tenor shaped some of the most memorable recordings in jazz history. So let's talk about the highlights. First up, Soul Station from 1960, Mobley's signature lyrical masterpiece featuring the standout tune This I Dig of You. That same year, Roll Call delivered hard bop energy with Freddie Hubbard lighting up the front line. Workout, released in 1961, brought relaxed conversational solos alongside guitarist Grant Green. Fast forward to 1963's No Room for Squares, modern, edgy and sophisticated with tracks like Caroline in the title cut. And don't miss 1965's Dippin', a bluesy feel-good gem featuring the magical Mobley-Lee Morgan pairing on The Dip. And that was a quick insight into everything that we discussed on this week's episode of the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. And that brings me to an end of this week's episode of the program. Don't forget, you can check out the archives of today's show on my YouTube channel, The Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan. So I'll see you again next week. Have a great week ahead.